All right. Okay, here we go. All right, so I'll go like this, and I go, John, edit here. Hello, and welcome to Mathlandia. This is the premiere edition of Mathlandia. It's a crazy world. I know. I'm John Samuelson. I'm in Beaverton, Oregon, and with me today, our math guru, or rock star, or whatever little term we just like to call him, a good teacher, is over in Bell River, Ontario. And go ahead and introduce yourself.
Kyle Pierce, yeah, right from Bell River, Ontario, about 40 minutes southeast of Detroit.
And then we always ask Canadians, how far are you from Michelle Cordy? That's more important for everybody.
Yeah, if you know Michelle Cordy, we're about an hour and a half up the 401 there. So she's about halfway between my town and Toronto for me. So only about an hour and a half, and she's always great when I have any conferences in London to go check out.
Ooh, that's good. Old Cordy M on the Twitters. And then our other question is, so my Canadian universe centers around. Well, I never mind the guys like the Kuroses and the Shareskis, but then my other Canadian just stalwart is, how far are you from Miss Victoria Olsen?
Ooh, very, very far. We
Yeah.
are my wife and I did it with a tent and a compact car, and it took us a couple weeks camping all the way out west. So driving straight, we're looking at, I want to say probably 30, maybe 30 hours.
Yeah, British Columbia can be far from Ontario, can't it?
Absolutely, and we're right in the southwestern tip, so there's kind of no real direct route.
Ooh.
To get there, we got to go up and around, or we got to cut through the U.S. So yeah, it's a good hike, but a very scenic hike.
It is. I love British Columbia. Is very picturesque. I'm a lot closer to Miss Victoria Olsen now that I live in Portland. I can just jump right up the 5 and get to her, I think. So
Oh,
that'll be
yeah,
good. That's like if I need to pull the ripcord and get some Miss Victoria Olsen FaceTime. She's usually hanging around with that guy Carl, her boyfriend. All right, so on to Mathlandia. Kyle is coming in, and we like to share 3 ideas about math, and we're probably going to do the podcast monthly as time permits. And I just want to say that we have our flagship podcast, I guess if you want to call it that, Techlandia. And Techlandia is kind of in fluctuation right now, but the 2 people that I just mentioned, Michelle Cordy and Miss Victoria Olsen, have agreed to come on and kind of co-host it with me, along with David Terrio, who is David T. Edu on the Twitters from California. And I'm trying to actually entice a few more people. But that is our flagship hour-long podcast where we talk about EdTech. We also are starting Devlandia, where we talk about just to developers of certain products. And Devlandia is a pretty cool one. I do that with my friend Jake Duncan, who is JKDNCN on the Twitters. He takes out all his vowels. And we also have Booklandia, which we just did with Colby Sharp last week at this time, and so that's where Colby will give you 3 books, and he runs the Nerdy Book Club. So we're trying to kind of branch out. So if this is your first episode of listening, I think that Techlandia is a very good podcast. There's 70 episodes. I think a lot of them, even though they're a year and a half old, really hold true to some different things. My old boss, who is Mr. Hooker on the Twitters, who is an ADE with you, right, Kyle?
absolutely. Yeah, Carl's great.
Carl's great, but you know what he did is after the great iPad Sammy, who is me, left him, he quit listening to Techlandia, and I've noticed lately that he has been very out of touch with things. He doesn't know about things like Voxer. He doesn't know about the book It's Complicated by Dana Boyd, which, I think that he needs to listen and get back to Techlandia because he seems a little bit flummoxed. So if you listen to things, you can really kind of stay, in tune with what's going on. He's a big deal tech director guy in Austin, Texas, but yeah, without Techlandia, he's a little bit lost. So he needs to come back to
Absolutely. Got to get
Techlandia.
back on your bandwagon, right?
That's right. He needs to jump. We used to have the great sound effect for Mr. Hooker, but now he doesn't interact with us anymore. All right, come back, Mr. Hooker. All right. So anyway, we're going to get into the topics right now. So we are talking. Kyle has done for his first one. He's going to talk 4 parts to a successful math lesson.
Yeah, I thought that this is actually something that I had presented this past summer in Chicago at the EdTech Teacher Conference.
Kyle, I'm from Chicago. Chicago. There we go. Right, I want to say, Kyle, Kyle and I have never met, so we're doing this. We have to get to know each other. So here's my Cubs right here.
Yeah, I think this is the second time we've actually verbally had a conversation, other than being on Twitter and kind of tweeting 140 characters back and forth. So it's kind of nice to see your face and connect the face with the voice. But
All right, so I will never interrupt you again. I just want to,
yeah,
when I do silly things like that, I just want to know Chicago gets the little fanfare.
well, I go off on tangents myself. Being a math guy, you can understand where that comes in. So, but yeah, back at EdTech Teacher Conference. I love presenting with those guys. I had an opportunity and went into this concept of a 4-part math lesson. Here in Ontario, they really push a format called the 3-part math lesson, not to be confused with the 3-act math tasks that Dan Mayer's made famous, and so many people like myself have learned so much from, and now try to create our own tasks. This is more of a lesson format of how to design a lesson that could incorporate something like a 3-act math task. I think we have a.
Oh, that's okay. Just pretend it's a sound effect from me. Just pretend I'm interrupting you again.
It was all planned this way, correctly.
That's right.
But yeah, this format in Ontario, there's 3 parts. They call it a minds-on. Where you get a warm up to the lesson, try to make some sort of little hint as to where you're going, and then the actions where I guess all the action actually happens, and then finally a consolidation. But what I find with the 3-part math lesson is that a lot of teachers kind of get stuck doing, or thinking that they're doing this 3-part math lesson and they don't need to make any sort of changes or modifications. They do a warm up problem. Similar to many different classes, you do some sort of question that might get kids thinking, and then you move into the topic for the day, and then at the end they give you some sort of consolidation task, typically homework in math class. So I really want to move that away from that and get a little bit more particular. So I call this a 4-part math lesson. And it begins with that minds-on, as we mentioned, but I like to be really clear that the minds-on should be connected to the learning goal from the previous day. Mm-hmm. I don't like to give too much away as to where we're going for the lesson that day. I want to see how well did the students make out with that new concept from the previous day. Is there any misconceptions we need to address? And it also gives them another opportunity to practice that learning goal. So typically, that can range from anywhere from 5 minutes even to 25 minutes of a lesson. Here in Ontario, in high school, we have 75 minutes in our math classes, just to give you some context there. Yeah, and then we move on to the second part, which is more of an inquiry type portion of the lesson. And this is the part where I really like to promote the students solving some sort of problem based on their prior knowledge. So not using any form of algebra or any form of set procedure that we're essentially going to learn later in the lesson. So once again, trying to make that connection from the previous day and then extend it to the new learning goal. And then I want to see the students solve it any way they possibly can. And what I find is that students will do a wide range of different solutions. Some will be really long, and I love when their problem or when their solution is really long and drawn out, because it just helps serve the purpose as to why we're in math class. We're trying to find a more efficient solution. So after that portion, we start moving on to make connections, and we try to consolidate the idea of how can we make this easy. Right? The math is supposed to make our lives easy, even though most of us look at math as it's actually ruins our lives, right? Because so many people struggle with it or don't have confidence in it. But what we want to do is we want to show the students that, listen, you just solved this problem, which is excellent, but it did take you 15 minutes to do it. What if we found a way, an effective way to do this in much less time? And that's where we try to draw into the more abstract concepts or the algebra. So typically, that inquiry question might be something a little bit more basic, and then this making connections piece would be, now, if I extend that to a more difficult problem, maybe using larger numbers, where now using pictures or diagrams may not be as effective. How could I do this so that I could solve any problem and I can do it in a relatively short amount of time? So that really helps there. And then finally, the consolidation would be a task. Not just homework. I don't say, rip off, 1 to 10 odd numbers or A, C, E, whatever it is. We want to pick like a good authentic task that's going to allow me to get a better understanding of where those students are relative to that new learning goal. And the benefit of the inquiry piece that I think a lot of us leave out just in order to save time, make sure that we get to all of those things we wanted to get to in the lesson. I think what it really does is it allows the students to have the confidence that they can solve the problem in that maybe long drawn out way. So obviously they're going to be able to do it in the short, efficient way. It just might take a little bit more time. So for me, that's huge, and I try to embed 3-act math tasks in the process. So typically, the Minds-On would be related to a 3-act math task from the previous day, so some sort of real-world problem offering context, piquing their curiosity, as Dan Mayer is always advocating for. And then the inquiry piece, I try to extend that 3-act task to something that will bring in that new learning goal. So I would love to go into a little more detail there as well, but it could be difficult without the visual aids. But that kind of gives you kind of a breakdown of a 4-part format, and I find it really helps. It really helps us find that comfortable balance between inquiry learning and discovery learning and more traditional learning, right? You can't swing too far to any one side. If we can find that balance in between, kind of marry the two, then I think we're doing something, or at least heading in the right direction anyway.
That's pretty cool. Now, have you written a blog post about just the breakdown of that at all, or have you just done the presentations about it?
Right now I have a post that kind of summarizes it with some visuals. It was actually my ADE Institute showcase that I did. They call it a 3-in-1, a 3-minute summary of something that you're doing in your classroom, or one great thing you're doing in 3 minutes, I should say. And I can provide that link as well. I'll make it a short link as we're talking here, just so that it's a little bit easier for us to talk about on the show. But on my site, tapintoteenminds.com, that post is still up on one of the recent posts. So tapintoteenminds.com.
Okay, so now I will tell you this, Kyle, that I have been a little bit, I don't know, I would just say that my enemy right now is time. So I have some of these things, but what we like to do is any resources that you put in our Google Doc, we'll make into a listly list, and so that way afterwards we share out. So we'll put the finished podcast, we'll put the link to your website, we'll put all that linked to the specific post. So yeah, just feel free. I've got my little notes right here, and I just jot them down, and we try and get the links so that everybody, if they want to come back to this episode or they're listening, and we don't want you to get into a car accident if you're listening and you want to write something down. So we'll provide all those things for you, and those always make good resources. So yeah, just go to put the link in the doc and we'll be good to go. That sounds really interesting. And so have you met Dan Mayer before?
Yes, I have. I've had the opportunity a few times to see him when he's presenting, and I've also had a couple opportunities to kind of have a chat with him after a few sessions. So just a great guy, like challenges my thinking every time I speak to him. I find that he has those, just like any good teacher, right, has those questions that make you maybe question yourself as to how you're doing things and how you can make things better. And just as an example of that, one discussion we had was about creating videos. So you've of course heard of the flipped classroom model, really popular in math. I'm not a big fan of the flipped classroom model, just simply probably because I like talking a lot. I'm not really sure, but but his thought, I used to say, I would take the lesson and I would summarize it in a video and provide it to the students as kind of a benefit, but it wasn't to replace the lesson, and it was more of a, if you got stuck on something, come back to it. And the one thing he said to me, and it still has me thinking, and I'm always, trying to figure out how to make it better, but he said, if you're providing a link and the student didn't get it the first time, how is the video going to help them when they go home to review it? And it really had me think, and I thought, you're right, because unless I do something different in the video, that's not going to help that particular student, right? So unless that video has a variety of strategies involved in it, then really, essentially, I think what he was getting at is, are you using your time effectively by doing that? If you're simply recreating what you've already done,
Mhm.
to provide it later. So now I'm trying to change and evolve my videos that I provide to students to have multiple, like basically differentiate for all the different students and show it in as many different ways so they can see it visually, and they can also see it algebraically, and they can see it, through a table, through a graph, through all the different representations. So hopefully one of those will click with the student, and then hopefully they can start to make those connections to the other representations.
That's very cool. That's very cool. Do you have the students create their own videos of how they solve them at all? Do you do that?
You know what? I have done it in the past. This year I haven't done it so much because what I'm finding now, and I see this when I go into my middle years collaborative inquiry schools, as a background, I teach in the morning, and then in the afternoon I work with grades 7 to 10 teachers in my district. And essentially what we're trying to do is, through collaborative inquiry, we're trying to find what are the, some great strategies, trying research proven strategies and so forth. And when it comes to making your thinking visible, a lot of people are using Explain Everything or other screencasting apps that are just great. But what we're finding is, if you're doing it in your class, and then especially if you're allowing the students to present their videos in front of the class, what are you now missing from the classroom? What are you cutting from the old agenda in
Mhm.
order to make that happen? So how do you find the balance where you could still get the students to make their thinking visible, ideally in a one-to-one where students are taking their devices home? It seems, for me, much more realistic.
Mhm.
You have the students do that process at home, because they don't really need your assistance to do their thinking or do their explaining.
Mhm.
They need your assistance to understand the concept. So I worry that sometimes we're sacrificing some class time to focus on creating a video, and now it's become more of a video editing
Mhm.
learning goal rather than a math learning goal. So just trying to be creative with how that happens and how often that happens, I think is really important.
I know. And then it always comes back to that old enemy of the teachers and students. Time, right?
Time,
So
time.
that is interesting. Okay, well that's good to know because yeah, I think that you're right. I think that in a one-to-one take home they could show the videos. We did bump across, and I know we talked about this just briefly, real quick, but there is a new app for iOS. I'm not sure if it's Android yet, but called MathChat. So if you type in MathChat, it's all one word. And we were testing that one out yesterday, my friend Dawn and I, and yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely got some potential there, and you can see the students, and they could actually collaborate, and you can see them working on their iPads in real time. We were testing it out, so it's something to look for as there's a little button for feedback. So we tried to give them some feedback, and we'll see what they see if they answer us back. App people usually will answer you back if they're serious.
Yeah, they're usually very efficient at doing so, especially new startups as well. Taking a look at MathChat, we've actually put in a help desk ticket at our board to get them installed on our student devices as well. I'm doing a pilot right now, basically loaning some iPads through a connection at Apple to essentially gauge, will having the iPad on a one-to-one full-time basis, unlike the part-time basis that usually our students are using in our school district, where they borrow them for the period. We want to see if there's an effect, if we can extend the school day beyond the walls of that 75-minute math period. If they have the technology with them, what will happen? So we want MathChat put on those devices, simply because it's like a back channel for the
Hmm.
students to chat, and that whiteboard, it's like Bayboard in a way, but a permanent back channel that they can post it up, and they can all offer some feedback to each other. And whether it's even 3 kids using it regularly instead of the entire class, I think there's some benefit to offering that to some students, right? Just so that they can put that call for help out there and really make it visual. If a student's stuck and they post a message we're using Google Classroom right now, piloting that in my
Hmm.
classroom. They can put some text on there, but if they want help on a specific math problem where maybe there's algebra that isn't easy to communicate using a traditional keyboard, they would have to go into their iPad and use an annotation app like GoodNotes, take a screenshot of it, upload the photo to Google
Hmm.
Classroom, and like lots of steps that you got to start wondering, okay, if it's a student that really needs the help, are they really going to go through all that work to possibly not get that question answered, right? Whereas with this MathChat, it seems pretty quick and easy for them just to pop in there, you toss it out, and then students will get to take a look and say, hey, I know how to do that problem. I'm gonna help this peer of mine out.
How about that would be you helping me if we were in MathChat. One of the things I like about it too is you can pop the teacher in, so the student can pop the teacher in if they want to, and when a person comes in to try and help, they can designate them a different color so that when you write on the iPad, the different color is actually corresponds with the person that that you've asked for help. And you can ask just specific people for help, or you could probably just tap everybody and get everybody in there if you needed to. So
Right.
yeah, I'm interested to see how that works for you. Then maybe we can talk about that one later. And you know what else I'd be interested in talking about as the year goes on too is just your feelings about how Google Classroom is working for you, because I know that everybody's started off at least last month or so with Google Classroom, and I know that I just saw. Did you see like I was saying on Google Plus, I saw that they've made some improvements already based on some teacher feedback. So for Google Classroom, so they've already kind of tried to upgrade it. But yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see how that works for you, because we're doing the same thing in our district.
Yeah, have you been using it at all yourself? Like, have you been able to kind of get in there, the nuts and bolts, or are you? I guess are you in the classroom to kind of see how it's working in the classroom, or how is that working for you?
Yeah, so what we're doing right now in Beaverton is we're actually letting teachers go ahead and write grants for devices that they want. So it can be iPads. We have iPads coming in, and we have Chromebooks coming in. And the only problem with us right now, as my official job title is Innovation Strategist for the Beaverton School District. But
Excellent.
what we don't have coming in is we don't actually have the devices in the hands right now. We're still in that little part because the bond got passed with the money for the devices just recently. So we're trying to work on the whole flow of that. But I am anxious to get in and work with some of the other people. There are devices around where students have access to technology. So I haven't been out there to see it. I've just messed around with it myself in a sample class. But I'm hoping that like November, December, we'll start being able to get out there and really I want to see how it works. And I'm very excited. I used to work for a learning management system. So
Nice.
that's at my startup last year. So it's kind of interesting. I know a lot about them.
Yeah, for me, I've got to say, like, I actually did a blog post, back in the summer when Google Classroom was coming out, and I had applied to try to get in on the pilot and, basically play around with it, because I've never really had much success using any learning management systems with the iPad. I just felt that there was always something missing, and I really disliked the restrictions, being kind of like a tech geek. I was into building my own blog or my own website or this or that, and for years I was just kind of mishmashing my course resources together using Google Calendar was one. That's another one. I've posted numerous blog posts about how to use Google Calendar, as a class website, or to get your presence online for your school, mm-hmm. And that worked great for me. But it was a little bit of mishmash, and for someone who's maybe new to technology, it wasn't as hey, click go and let's get things going and step by step. It was more having an understanding of how it worked, and I understood that workflow and was comfortable with it, but teaching other people how to do that mm-hmm. Was a real challenge if they weren't comfortable with the technology as it was. So I've looked at Schoology. Some people love Schoology around here. iTunes U, I feel, is kind of more of a one-way system currently. Mm-hmm. I can see some great things happening with iTunes U, but it's not quite there for me in terms of the workflow. To get work to students and back from students without mm-hmm. having to fish through shared folders and so forth. Mm-hmm. So I've tried a ton, but just never committed to one. And I saw Classroom and I said, you know what, I'm going to give it a shot. I really want to test it out this semester. I'm going to duke it out and see how it goes. And if I like it, I'll keep going with it. And if not, we'll go back to the old, hodgepodge of Google Calendar embedded in a site, and link to this and link to that. But I'm really liking the experience in Google Classroom. There are a lot of areas. I've been sending them feedback of things that I think will be pretty easy upgrades for them to make, just in terms of having a little bit more functionality, like scheduling posts and things like that. But just the workflow, how it really ties in Google Drive. And if you have Google Docs, you can fish out the link and search for it, put it in there, or a YouTube video. Everything's really embedded within that whole system, and I'm enjoying it. As I mentioned, even though there's some areas that could improve.
That's good. Well, I was interested to see it, and then last year I did not work in schools. Like I said, I worked for various startups, and it was interesting. Once I saw that, I thought, oh, okay, this looks. I really want to check it out, but I couldn't because I didn't have a Google Apps for Education account. And then I got a job, so now I'm like, oh yeah, I want to try that out for sure. So it'll be interesting. So we can kind of compare notes as we go along, because I think that that's one of those steps where you're talking about you want to extend the 70 minutes, the 75 minutes of the school day. Google Classroom will give you the opportunity to do, like any learning management system, will give you the opportunity, as a teacher, if you want to sit there and, say I'm having office hours from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. I'll be online listening to Spotify and go answering Facebook posts, so they can they can have a tab open and just answer questions as they're there. I think that's what people don't understand. Like, if they say they're having office hours, really, teachers, come on, you can just look at your Facebook like you normally do anyway. And I don't know why you're on Facebook. Get off Facebook. It's a waste of your time. So, all right, Cal, can I call an audible for you real quick? Because I know that we have some good stuff here. So we've probably, this is how we are when you get two guys that like to talk math, because I love math, together. We should say there's no set pattern for when we do our podcast. So you want to do it in a couple weeks, that's fine. We can do it monthly, whatever. But why don't we save 2 and 3, since we've actually kind of talked about our 3 things. We kind of talked about MathChat. We kind of talked about Google Classroom. Why don't we save those as our 3 for this time? And there is an interesting SAMR discussion that I was looking at. I put in there, I don't know if you looked at the stars, but I'm like, ooh, we could get into a little healthy SAMR debate, because that's the thing. I always like to talk to people, because there's a lot of times when I talk to people at conferences and we don't necessarily agree. But then if you sit there and just have a respectful conversation and you'd go in and I never assume that I'm right about anything, and most of the time I'm wrong. So people can easily sway me one way or the other. I'd be a good person for a voter. They could probably sway me one way or the other. But if you have a good argument, I've talked with a lot of people, and the SAMR thing is interesting for me, because while I do like it, I do think that it's kind of misunderstood as well. I think that we're kind of, I don't know. It's an interesting topic of conversation. But let's start with number 2 for next time, and then we'll go 2 and 3, and then we can just see where that takes us. Does that sound good?
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, we'll go off the cuff every week. I mean, we'll have a blueprint, but we'll follow a green print if it doesn't work out that way.
I know that's what was funny. It was David Terrio who's gonna do some the Techlandias with me. Just kept thinking, what do we have to do? What do we have to do? I said, we have a Google Doc, and it's more like we just sit down and chat, and we're just having a cup of coffee. That's all we're having.
Or I wish I had one of those right now, actually.
I wish I could send you one. I should tweet you a coffee for going through your first congratulations of Mathlandia. But I do know from Michelle Cordy that it's hard to get the tweet-a-coffees across international boundaries. It'll
get hung up for months. It's horrible.
She tweeted me a coffee one time, and I couldn't accept it because it was from Canada. What's up with that, Starbucks? Come on, we're one world.
That's sad,
Well, thank you for being on here. We appreciate it. And like I said, just let me know. I was very interested. I love the 4 steps to the lesson, because I like everything that you talked about, because that's what I really tried to do as a math teacher, because the last 4 years while I was in the classroom, I was math and science strictly, so I really got to know the math really well, and at least for that 4th and 5th grade math book. And listening to you, I'm like, okay, that's good, because that's what I tried to do as well. Maybe not in those step processes, but we tried to do a lot of those things, and we used to use the program. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. Everyday Math is one of those, and they'll say use this method, use partial quotients to solve this or whatever. And I always just used to tell the kids, I'm going to show you the methods. Use whatever you want. So when it says in the book, use partial quotients method to solve this problem, I say, no, solve it like you would solve it. and just use whatever strategy you want. As long as you have a good strategy and it's working for you, that's what we want. So
Yeah, and I think seeing those strategies, and in life, you're going to pick the strategy that works best for you, and ultimately, there's some strategies that lead to bigger concepts and so forth. But as the teacher, we take those opportunities when they come. But we really have to build the confidence in the students first, right, to get them confident in doing a strategy, and then if we can get them to some more like multiple representations, multiple strategies, that's going to help deepen their understanding, in my opinion, anyway. So. No, it was a pleasure being on the show. I'm so happy that you've invited me to join you on this this Mathlandia adventure now, moving from Techlandia and Booklandia to Mathlandia.
Oh yeah, we got them all. We got them all, and don't forget about Devlandia too. Those are some interesting conversations with people trying to do some different products. So we're trying to make the Landias a little bit shorter. So I think that when we go back to Techlandia, Kurt, Alice, and I used to talk for hour, 4 hours, whatever we would talk for. So we're really going to try and make it a little bit more bite-sized for people so they can, listen on their commute and go that way. So yeah, we're very happy to have you on here. And I could talk math all day, seriously. We had a good 20-minute conversation before we came on, didn't we?
Yeah, exactly. We said, man, why didn't we hit the record button?
I know, we should just record it. We could get 2 episodes already.
Too bad, eh?
All right, well, you tell everybody in Canada that I said hello. Tell them iPad Sammy says hello, and pretty soon I won't be iPad Sam anymore. I'm going to change my Twitter handle, but tell them I said hello.
Pulling the audible on Twitter then, too, eh?
That's right. That's right. All right, well, thank you for being on, Kyle, and we will catch you on the flip side.